Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate. This is the Newport County Summer Deep Dive. If you like what we do here at EFL Debate, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. Delighted to be joined by Ed and Jamie from the 1912 Exiles podcast. Ed, I wanted to talk about Newport County's sort of prospects for next season under Hugh Jenkins's ownership, because with the new head coach appointed quite early in the summer and one or two off-field figures as well, is there a confidence that preparation for this season is going to be a bit smoother than preparation for the last?
Well, it could hardly be worse. I mean, it wasn't great going into the summer. We had a poor run of form, and Nelson Jardim left this year with a couple of games to spare. But actually, it was even worse the previous summer when we waited, from memory, like 6 weeks before we sacked Graham Coughlin. Then there was a long gap before we appointed Nelson Jardim, but it was pretty obvious, I think, from that process that he wasn't necessarily the first choice, and players were getting signed by the chairman, and it was all a bit chaotic, and pre-season preparations were not what you ideally would want. So it couldn't have been worse than that. As it was this season, Jardim left with a couple of games to spare. We then, relatively soon after the season, appointed David Hughes as the new manager. And we might come back to why I think it's significant he's a manager rather than a head coach. And he appointed his own backroom staff, which I think is, again, significant. And we have made some statement signings. Again, we'll doubtless come on to them early doors. So I think there is a sense that although it's going to be, we're all guessing as to how we might do this season. It's unpredictable. We have hit the ground running in a way that we definitely did not do last year. And the quality of the early signings and the experience that we've replaced in the squad, I think, has allayed some fears that we might be up for another relegation battle. I still don't think it'll be a vintage season, but I'm in a much better place psychologically about it than I was after the final whistle on the last day.
Do you share that optimism, Jamie?
Yeah, absolutely. As Ed was saying, last season, our squad was effectively sort of razed to the ground, then rebuilt, but it was rebuilt with a very particular mindset. Hugh Jenkins was limited budget-wise, and we kind of went trawling through the Welsh leagues for some bits of potential, some bits of hope that we could maybe unearth a gem and then make a bit of money. Hugh Jenkins is very keen to sort of stress that he's not come in with a big wedge of cash. He wants to make us a sustainable football league club in terms of the operations, and we were kind of all for that, but we were quite concerned that our squad was very limited in terms of its game time and experience, particularly in the Football League. League Two is not a place to sort of, tread water carefully. It's a rough league. It's a long old season. And I think our squad, with its sort of lack of experience, was found out a little bit. We were quite lightweight in a lot of those games. This season already, as Ed pointed out, we've made a couple of signings, 2 or 3 signings, and already we can see that they're a little bit older. And they have a lot more games under their belts, basically. So, yes, more optimistic.
Ed, I mean, I think a great model for the club is to invest in top Welsh talent. And it seems like the club's already doing that so far this summer, because if you look at the catchment area for young Welsh footballers, Newport County have a very large catchment area in the sense that Wrexham, Cardiff and Swansea City are all competing in the upper echelons of the EFL, whereas Newport County are in maybe a better place to develop players that maybe aren't quite at that level yet, but have the potential to get there. Do you see that being the strategy that Hugh Jenkins is going to move forward with?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he said he wants to recruit Welsh talent partly for reasons, of I think it helps with building a squad mentality if people have got similar backgrounds and all the rest of it. But also, geographically, it makes it a lot easier to build team spirit and get everyone on the same page if players aren't having to commute down from the northeast of England or whatever. So that will help, and having the Welsh, the quality of the Cymru League improves with every single season. And we've seen with some of the players who've come through the ranks at County, most notably Will Evans, that we can be that springboard for them to make that leap into full-time football. Which isn't to say that all of them will do it. There will be some that can make the leap and some that can't. And, Nathan Wood was one who came in a couple of seasons ago. And, we all loved Woody, but he perhaps wasn't quite up to the standard, but he's gone back to Penabont and will doubtless continue to rip it up there. The one I think we're most excited about is young Joe Thomas, who came in last season, was very much a squad player at the start. And then by the end of the season was regularly starting in that right wing back position, and is the one I think who will kick on this season. I'm really excited to see what happens with Joe Thomas. And if we can keep that production line going, because like you say, we are the springboard in a way that Cardiff and Swansea and Wrexham probably are not going to be because of the level at which they're playing. If we can carry on being that springboard, I think that's good for us. And I think it's also good for Welsh football as a whole.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case. Jamie, is in terms of specifics, is it Matt Smith that's the signing that you're most encouraged by so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Although we signed this Jed Garner yesterday, I think it was, and I'm quite intrigued to see how he's getting on. But yeah, Matt Smith for sure is the one that you look at. Basically, our midfield has been very lightweight, and I know Ed will come on to this as well. It has been very lightweight, and that's where we've sort of found that soft centre has really let us down. So we're just hoping for someone like Matt Smith to come in and sort of stamp his authority on the middle of the park, basically. So yes, absolutely.
The David Hughes appointment then, Ed, there's been some people that have looked at it with some apprehension about the fact that he's unproven, like Nelson Jardim, but I think he's probably somebody who comes with a greater coaching pedigree. He's got a lot of experience, I think, working particularly in the Manchester United setup. But the big thing for me is that, like Michael Flynn had when he first took the reins, he's got experienced figures around him. I think he's got Wayne Hatswell back as an assistant, which I think is a big thing. I believe there's another operational figure of a similar sort of use.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. So to be fair to Nelson Jardim, he had a very, very strong coaching pedigree as well. He'd worked with some of the best minds in Europe. David Hughes has also worked with some huge clubs, and I don't think there's any doubting the technical ability, but it's always the question of, once you are the main man in the hot seat, you've got to take those decisions and take the pressure that goes with it. And you don't know how someone does in that environment until they're under that pressure. David Hughes has had one spell, I think, previously as a manager, and that was at Barry Town 20 years ago. That's a long time ago and at a completely different level. But from Barry Town fans we spoke to, he got very positive reviews from that. For me, I mean, you're right. He's got good people around him. Wayne Hatswell is a really good pick as an assistant, someone who knows the club inside out, who's really well respected. But for me, actually, the biggest signifier of how things are going to change is that he's a manager. He's not a head coach, which is what Nelson Jardim was. He clearly wants to have more of a say in terms of signings, team selection, perhaps than his predecessor did. And I think you also see that in the quality of the signings who've come in. So, I mean, you mentioned Matt Smith, Jamie mentioned Jed Garner, Nick Zanev as a goalkeeper. These are all players who are at their peak, 25, 26, with hundreds of league games behind them. They are not the signings we were making last summer. Last summer, it was all about 22-year-olds who played a handful of league games or lots of Cymru League football, making a step up. I'm not saying all the signings this summer will be the same. I'm sure we will bring in some more from that playbook. But clearly, David Hughes has got the clout to say to Mr. Jenkins, I need some experience in here, and this is, a kind of red line for me. And I think that fills us with a bit more confidence that there will be more of a robust exchange of ideas, perhaps between manager and chairman. And that doesn't mean to say the manager always needs to get their way, but I think probably we do need to have a bit more of a robust exchange than we had last season, because we don't want to keep finishing 22nd and surviving by the skin of our teeth. That's no good for fans, and actually it's no good for the chairman's investment. So no, exactly. So we're all for let's spend within our means and all the rest of it. But I think we want to see, we have to see an improvement on the pitch in terms of results next season, because, otherwise attendances start to drift and you end up with the stench of death around the place that perhaps our neighbours up the road in Cardiff have had over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Jamie, I wanted to ask you about that Nick Zarnev signing, because the feedback I've got on Zarnev from previously in his career, specifically from his time at Wimbledon, is that he's an excellent shot stopper and could have, upper League One, even Championship potential from that point of view. I think in other areas of his game, particularly in terms of distribution, there's been more of a question mark. And so I'm curious about the style that you're expecting David Hughes to want to implement, and whether, if it is a bit of a footballing style, whether he'd be able to kind of fit into that. I think that would be the question mark at this stage.
Yeah, well, the other Nick that Nick Zarnev replaced, Nick Townsend, was arguably our player of the season last year, and unfortunately we didn't hold on to him. But he was also an excellent shot stopper with questionable distribution, so we're kind of used to that already. I don't know too much about the style that David Hughes wants to play. I assume because when Hugh Jenkins came in, he was very keen to sort of stress that this is a particular way of playing, a particular setup that he wants. So as players and management come and go, I think that similar style will remain. I don't think we got the best of that last season. Kind of possession with a purpose. It's not just about passing it around, but I think it's a little bit more direct than that. But yes, I'm equally intrigued because, as Ed was saying, we've not seen much of what David Hughes is, a David Hughes managed team quite looks like. But yes, equally just intrigued to see the first game of the season basically come early August.
How's the defence looking at the moment, Ed, in terms of players available?
Well, I think you're asking the wrong question there, and I'll tell you why. So this is my hobby horse, and Jamie will roll his eyes. You've heard me talk about this ad nauseam. Obviously, last season, I think I'm right in saying we had the worst defensive record in the 4th division last year. But actually, my strong feeling is that on paper, the first choice back line is not bad. I think in Joe Thomas, we've got a good in Joe Thomas, we've got a good right back. In who's the lad? Davies, who we brought
Tom
in. Tom Davis from Cardiff, I think is a decent left back. In central defence, you've got the likes of Matt Baker, James Clark, Kieran Brennan. I think they're an all right defence. I think they will make the odd mistake, and perhaps the players behind them in the pecking order might not be as strong. The problem we had last season was not the defence. That wasn't why we let the goals in. The problem was the paucity of the midfield in front of them. So actually, the proportion of chances from which we conceded wasn't too bad. It was the sheer number of chances we gave away because that defence had no protection from the midfield. That was the problem that needed fixing. And I do think that Matt Smith will help with that. A good experienced box-to-box midfielder. The other thing we desperately need to sign before August is a midfield bastard. We need that sort of hard, rugged.
You've been waiting to use that word, Ed.
I have that hard midfielder, with a permanently broken nose and an attitude problem, who will win the ball and kind of take no prisoners. We didn't have that last season, and it really showed that we had a few perfectly capable creative players in midfield, but they were shrinking violets, and you need someone who sets that standard and is a hard tackler. If we sign that, then I think we're really in business next season. Getting the goals is another challenge. We need to score more goals, but actually stopping the defensive problems is going to be fixed by fixing the midfield. It's counterintuitive, but I think that was for me was the biggest priority going into the summer. We've made some progress with Matt Smith. We need another, I think.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can sign that midfield bastard. I wanted to ask you, Jamie, about Kieran Brennan, because he's somebody who I kind of noticed early on in his career at Sheffield Wednesday as somebody who can ping a nice pass to the sides, and he has got that sort of ball-playing capability. I'm wondering how much you've seen of it at Rodney Parade so far.
Oh, 100%. There is potential there. And he's one of the ones, we're very pleased. Him and Matt Baker have sort of come on. They've had a full season with it. Well, Matt Baker's had a few seasons with us, but Brennan in particular, he's had a full season. I am hoping. So my thinking from last season, I'll just take, Brennan as an example of the whole squad. We signed all of these players who are quite inexperienced, and they got found out a few times throughout the course of the season. I'm hoping, they've had that 46 games under their belt. They're going to come back in full preseason under a new manager. And I think sometimes players just click. They just feel like, yeah, I know what I'm about now. This is my chance to sort of really step up and sort of make my mark on this league. Yes, I think the likes of Baker and Brennan at the back, having a good ball playing abilities is really good for us. I think, as Ed was alluding, the middle of the park is where we struggled, but we did create a lot of chances out wide. We've got a lot of decent players, with a lot of potential. Bobby Camwer, Glennon as well, who was a left back, but it looked very good going forward. He created a lot of our chances on that left wing. So being able to ping the ball out to those wingers and let them take on players and create chances of our own is something that I think is going to be very important for us.
Yeah, I mean, Glennon can certainly create chances for Newport, Ed, but he can also create chances for the opposition sometimes as well. How do you see that competition with Tom Davis unfolding next season?
I mean, it will partly depend on what formation the new manager wants to play. I think the thing we all said last year is in the games where you're going to be pegged back by a strong opposition, Davis, I think, all day long is the one you want to play at left back. If you're playing more of a wing back system and you need creativity, Glennon absolutely is great marauding forward. He's got a good cross, good on set pieces. I think the problem is you couldn't really have a side that accommodates Glennon and Camwer because, you want them both sort of marauding down that left wing. So it's hard at the moment within the squad we've got to see how you can accommodate both of those. I would expect, and for me, Davis, I think, is probably the stronger one who I would be starting. And I think Glennon needs to show either how he can fit into a different role or he needs to be challenging Camwer for that kind of left wing sort of spot. But to be honest, until we've seen a few friendlies and a few league games and we know the system, it's hard to say. But there's definitely ability there. I mean, I like Glennon on a good day, but Glennon on a bad day, we said it loads of times last season, it's no coincidence the number of teams who targeted that left back position because they saw it was a weakness. And if every team you play against is targeting your left back, then I'm afraid your left back is a problem. So I think that is something that we need to shift up.
Yeah, and hopefully Glennon can sort of iron out some of those issues and become a bit more of a better rounded left back because he's clearly got those creative qualities that Jamie mentioned. I wanted to ask you, Jamie, about Bobby Camwer. Do you think he'll stay at Rodney Parade next season?
I certainly hope so. I've seen a few, in the nose on the social medias touting him around, but believe that at your will. To be honest with you, he's under contract, and unless there's somebody who really wants to come in and buy him off us, then he'll be there next season, and I certainly hope so because he was really the one sort of like had that spark going forward. I can't remember the last time we had a player genuinely taking on defenders with the ball, with pace, with a bit of trickery, and he got 2 hat tricks last season, so it was phenomenal. On a good day, he is one of the more unplayable players in the football in League Two.
The one thing I will say though is I felt we got the best out of Camwer in the second half of the season when we had David Ajaboy on loan on the other wing. And I think we needed that balance because early in the season, teams were doubling up on Camwer because he was the only outlet, and it stymied us. Whereas once Ajaboy came in, they couldn't double up on Camwer because they had to have people marking the threat from both wings. So I do think, I mean, I would love to see David Ajaboy back. I love David Ajaboy. He's exactly my sort of player. But if he doesn't come, we still need someone who can provide that that balance to Camwer on the other side, particularly if we have a front man, whether that's Baker Richardson or whether it's Garner, who needs wingers playing off him. That, it's all about that balance up top.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, Jamie, pace is going to be quite important in both counts because as Ed mentioned there, if Camwer stays, you need somebody who can take attention away from him. But also with somebody like Jed Garner or somebody like Baker Richardson, neither of them are necessarily the quickest forwards. So I think that you need players from wide positions, or whether it's a number 10 that can get beyond. You need a fair amount of pace in there, especially if you're going to be possibly on the back foot in a lot of games, which Newport County at this level would often expect to be as one of the lower budgets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sort of taking those chances on counter-attacks when we are being pegged back a little bit is going to be important. Yeah, we do need a bit of support for the likes of Camwer. I'm kind of intrigued by, I think getting the right striker in to support, not necessarily about pace though. I'm more concerned about sort of like the link up play with the likes of Cameron when we do have the ball and we do have a bit of possession, because I think then players, opposition teams kind of will sit back and then we just have struggled to break down teams in the past, and it's just sort of led to nothing really. So having that striker, that Will Evans type, that Dom Telford, Fox in the box kind of player, who can just get onto the end of those chances that likes of Camwer and another winger could potentially create, I think is going to be key for us.
Ed, I remember Newport County a couple of years ago when it felt like you had a core of long-serving players. I'll say Mickey Demetriou and Cameron Norman, and I'm sure there are a few in midfield as well. And it felt like you had that really long-serving core of players that you could really rely on. And I'm sort of wondering at the moment, it feels like that's been eroded a little bit in recent years. And I'm wondering, is one of the challenges and possibly one of the things you mentioned with that midfielder profile that you described, is there a case for maybe building that core of players that can be the building blocks, if you like, for what Newport County can try and achieve in the next few seasons?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, you're right. Like Cameron Norman, Mickey Demetriou, Matty Dolan, Scott Bennett. I mean, Scott Bennett was here forever.
Yeah, he was,
and many of us would still love to have him back. But that was hugely important for the development of the squad and the morale around the place. And we definitely miss it. Absolutely. I think, to be fair, we've moved to this model of young players, but with the aspiration, obviously, you want them to flourish and succeed, and ideally, you want to sell a few, and that's how you bring the money in and make it sustainable. But you also want the good ones, if possible, to stick around. So I think we will see things settling down. We had a complete squad rebuild last summer. I think there's still work to do this summer, but I do hope after that we start to see players hanging around for longer than just 1 or 2 seasons. I think the one that was really critical for us this summer that I was really pleased to see was James Clark renewing. He is one who's been around for a long time. I'm not sure many of us were convinced he would necessarily take up the contract renewal that was offered to him. And actually, I think back in January, most of us thought he might not even get offered a contract. But I think it became clear in that last bit of the season just how important he was in terms of helping the younger players develop in that defence, and also just the kind of measured, calm, sensible head that he provides. So I think that has helped. And I also get the strong impression from everything David Hughes has said and the players he's brought in so far that he understands the need to have some experienced players around the place. Now, that doesn't mean they all need to be 33, 34, but it does mean you need a cohort of players who've got 100, 200 games under their belts, who have got something to dig on and draw on in the games when you're behind, and you need that bit of experience and expertise.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, Jamie, what other areas do you think Newport County need to strengthen in between now and the window?
Everywhere, really. Still, I think, the sort of nucleus of the squad is looking. It's getting there. It's okay, but it's still a bit threadbare in terms of, like Ed was saying, the actual experience that we have. I'm intrigued to see if we'll sign another goalkeeper, whether it'll be number 2, number 1, whatever, because I think Zanev is part of the New Zealand setup, so I think we'll be missing him for several international windows. Across the back as well. Just not sure whether Shane McLaughlin's going to stay or not. So he'll be a player. He's one with quite a bit of League 2 experience that we would need to replace should he not sign on. The longer you wait for an announcement, you kind of assume he won't sign on. But yes, midfield for sure, and just some other creative attacking outlets, whether that be strikers. Certainly strikers. I don't think we've got many on the books at all at the minute. But yes, another winger, an Azure Boy replacement, or a Camwer Mark II, basically. So no specific areas, but a bit of everything, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Jamie's right that if Zanev is off for large parts of the season, I think a lot of fans would worry about Jacob Carney as the backup. I don't think he covered himself in glory in the couple of games he started last year, so he'd have to show that he has kicked on. And for me, other than that, it's that grizzled midfielder who can win the ball, and then the right wing balance to Camwa that would be my other priorities. But that doesn't necessarily need to be someone who's hugely experienced, but it needs to be someone with pace and skill. So a younger player in that position is okay, but yeah, experience in centre mid alongside Matt Smith, I think, is the one I'm looking out for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering in that sort of number 10 position, if it is going to be a 4-2-3-1 with David Hughes, we don't know what formation he's going to want. Do you think you're missing a bit of a Josh Sheehan sort of advanced creative kind of option in that squad at the moment?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Ed. Yeah, I think so. I think we were wondering whether Aaron Wildig would come back. Obviously, he spent a lot of last season out injured, so we didn't know kind of what his situation was going to be. But we felt that we missed his, because he was given the captaincy at the start of the year as well, and then pretty much straight away out. And I think we missed his nous in that sort of hole just behind the strikers. Yes, I think that is a position that probably desperately needs filled. It kind of not only the midfield not only requires a bit of bolstering on the defensive front, but also a little bit of creativity. We can't just rely on Camwa and whoever the striker is to sort of provide all of that. We need probably better link-up play between defence, midfield, and attack.
I do think on that though that Kai Whitmore, who never quite sparkled last season. He had a couple of good moments, scored a couple of great goals, but never quite made the step up that I sort of expected him to. Big summer for him, big start of next season. I think the raw ingredients are there. He needs to kind of be a bit more disciplined in terms of aggression. He needs to be a bit more disciplined in terms of knowing when to make the run, when to try and make the killer pass rather than trying to do everything. But I do think he could be the one who provides that bit of extra creativity. We know he can do it, but it's the how and the when. So that's the one I'm watching. The other player who I think I want to see more of next season is Oliver Greaves, who started off last season, scored on opening day, and then clearly had some sort of falling out with the manager and was sidelined. But again, he's another one who he's got a bit of pace. I think if you play him right off a Jed Garner type, I do think there's a player there. So I'm interested to see whether he gets a chance to make a claim.
He made a big step up, didn't he, Ollie Greaves, because he was from the lower echelons of non-league football. So it was, I think, a 3 or 4 division step up, which you've got to make some allowances for. But hopefully he can make that jump. Any young lads around, knocking around from the academy, Jamie, that you're quite excited about?
I'm not too well versed on the academy players, but I know there are a few that the rest of the pod are very excited about. So
the one I like is Nelson Sanka, a centre back. Yes. I think he's 17, might be 18 this season. He's physically massive for a lad of his age. A good header of the ball. He did really well under Graham Coughlin. Coco, as you would expect, knew exactly how to train a young centre-back. He wasn't necessarily a Jardim sort of player, and he had one horrific game. I think it was against Port Vale, or it might have been Swindon at the start of the season, and then sort of got sidelined a bit. But he's one who the ingredients are there. He's got time on his side. He spent part of last season, I think, at Avon Lido, but I want to see him fully involved in pre-season. It may be that he needs another loan spell somewhere, but he's one who, again, you look at and you think, well, if things go his way, he gets the right chances and he takes them. He's one who might one day be worth a few quid.
Well, let's hope that's the case. What's your general feeling then, guys, about what's in store for next season, and what's the expectation? Is it to not be in a relegation battle and to finish a few places higher whilst developing a few players and a core of players to move forward with?
Yeah, I think not being in a relegation battle is the dream at the minute. We've had a few of those in recent years, and it's just not been fun. So to witness at all, I'm quietly confident based on early movements this summer with the management staff and the 3 players that we brought in, and the players we've decided to sort of release as well. I think we know what was working, what wasn't working. There's been a slight shift in mindset from the board and Hugh Jenkins in terms of who we want to bring in. I kind of feel like a mid-table finish is not out of the question. I'm intrigued to what Ed is thinking, because we haven't actually spoken about our thoughts yet. So yeah.
Yeah, our big podcast season preview isn't for another couple of weeks, so we've allowed ourselves a bit more time to see the signings. But I mean, we'll go from the quietly confident of Jamie to the noisily ambivalent of me. I veer from one extreme to the other. I mean, on paper, after the end of last season, you think, yeah, realistically, we probably are going to have to scrap a little bit, but all of the early signs are genuinely good. It's not me putting a positive gloss on things. Like the managerial appointment is good. The signings have been perfectly on point. The players are back early for pre-season training. If we can go into the season not just with an enhanced squad, which I think we will do, but also the crucial part with a clear style of how we want to play, which we never really alighted on last year, then I think we can start looking up. I still think we'll probably be bottom half, but if we can be top half of the bottom half, then that'd be great. And the other thing I would really like next season, I'd like a cup run, because we did not have a cup run last season. Cup runs are so important to the soul of this club. And if we finish, 15th, comfortably 15th, but we have a nice little run in one of the cups and have a bit of optimism around the place, I think that would really be good, because we do need to get our mojo back a little bit as a fan base. Last season was a pretty hard slog, and this year, if we can find one or two things to cheer about and have a bit of joy in our hearts, then I think we'll all start to get behind the project a little bit, and we can start to look up the table.
Joy in our hearts. I want to start singing "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands." Jamie, what's the biggest reason to believe in Newport County right now?
Oh, now you're talking. I think just the fact that we have a process, we have a mindset in place. We're not scrabbling around season to season, just seeing what loan players we can get in, or just what sort of players are available. We've got like a process in place. We've got a just a long-term plan. And I have to sort of give Hugh Jenkins and the board the benefit of time. He didn't come in promising, changes afoot. He just said steadily improve. When we had him on the podcast, he pointed out quite rightly that when he was at Swansea, it took, I think, 4 or 5 seasons just to get out of League Two.
I'm not saying sign, actually, Jamie, that he went on the podcast in the first place, because it's not every owner would do that.
Absolutely. He was very happy to come on, very open as well with us, and honest. And that sort of gave us a lot of cause for optimism. And I think that the best thing to be optimistic about is the fact that, he has seen, his plan for sort of, trying to sort of scrape by on these very inexperienced youngsters. It just worked. It could have been a disaster, but it just about worked. And we can see already he's sort of adapting. He's realized, right, that's not going to work again next season. So I like the fact that we've got somebody in place who's, quite sensible, quite pragmatic, and realizes he needs to adapt when things aren't quite working.
Biggest reason for doubt?
I'll take that one. I think there is a propensity amongst Newport fans, for good reason, both historical and recent, towards naysaying and predicting Armageddon. Last season, let's be honest, we were safe by Easter. It wasn't. To my mind, we were never truly in a relegation scrap because Morecambe and Carlisle were so bad. But you go on the message boards or on social media, and people be saying, "Oh, we're going to be back playing Conference South football in 2 seasons' time." And I think sometimes you start to say stuff like that loudly enough and regularly enough, and it starts to permeate into the skin of the place. And I think we need to avoid that, because Hugh Jenkins, he may not have millions of pounds sloshing around, and he's not the sort of owner who, like our former Super Euro Millions winner, pumping money in. We're not in that period. But what we have got is someone who wants to make a bit of steady progress and see a return on his investment, which is why he is putting money in at the moment into some experienced players, because that's what we need. So I think we need to slightly, cliche alert, trust the process. I think we do have a good nucleus of experienced players. I think we've got some very promising young players who are developing well, and we perverse desire to go everything's awful, just because we lose a close game every now and then. So the back end of last season was genuinely awful, but there were lots of periods in the season where we were making progress, we'd have the odd setback, and people would react like the world was on fire.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can embrace a bit more positivity under David Hughes. I think for what it's worth, I'm inclined to buy into some of that optimism. I think people I speak to on the League Two message group we've got for this podcast often say Newport County, I'm worried about them from a financial point of view and that kind of thing, and we don't know how good the manager is. But I would kind of expect this window to be better than the last, and from a preparation point of view, I can see why you'd be hopeful of maybe climbing a few places. Well, there you have it. Listen, gents, thanks so much for joining us from the 1912 Exiles podcast. Look forward to checking out the season preview podcast you've got coming up in a couple of weeks. Ed, Jamie, thanks so much for your time. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive. If you like what we do here, you can get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify, and you can also subscribe to 1912 Exiles. Thanks very much, and we'll see you again for another Summer Deep Dive very soon.